Hello Year 9, hope everyone is doing very well and you were able to enjoy the beautiful weather we had this half term. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to try a little video lesson for us so that you get to see a familiar face and just a new method of approaching a brand new topic as well. What we're going to move on from is go from Art Deco and look at the world of book illustrations. We're going to focus on narrative illustrations. Narrative illustrations are used to visually depict a narrative, a story. It's in the name. These can include comic books, graphic fiction, storyboarding, animation. All of these things are a type of narrative illustration. We are going to focus on that we find in books. So what I want you to do, your title for today is narrative illustration. Is write down what you think a picture is worth 1,000 words means. Now, I'm sure we've all heard that phrase, that sentence, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Pause this video and tell me what you think this phrase means. So welcome back. So you've got your title, you've written down what you think a picture is worth 1,000 words means. Basically, images are a very universal language. Part of the reason silent cinema, like stars like Charlie Chaplin, got so popular is that they visually told a story. They didn't require a language to be understood. There was no barrier in terms of reading anything, in terms of speaking a language. It was all very visual. If you could see it, you could understand it. A single image has the power to communicate a multitude of ideas, of details, without using any written language or having any of these barriers in the way. Narrative illustrations are used in this sense to convey clues and information that are held in narratives. They are a way to enhance narrative tales and draw the reader more into a story. They represent, interpret, and heighten the meaning of text. It is a way to communicate to the reader, to draw them in a bit more, and to excite them, to get their imagination going. Some people don't like this idea and say that text should be enough, but others argue that it's there to heighten the experience. You don't open a book to look at pictures, but the pictures there help form this story in your mind. The practice of illustration goes back to ancient times. Stories have very typically been accompanied with illustrations, as literacy and things like that were barriers to understanding these things. Illuminated manuscripts are an example of this. A manuscript is a book that has been handwritten. So all the books you have in your house, I doubt any of them are manuscripts because they would all have been printed off a computer or a press. Manuscripts are handwritten, toiled after, very personal things. Of course, going back to 400 to 600 AD, we didn't have printers, we didn't have presses. It was all manuscripts, all handwritten. And these are where the earliest ones of these come in, from the early Roman Empire. However, the majority of these illuminated manuscripts come from the Middle Ages and Renaissance periods, and they are typically religious in nature. These were handwritten books, manuscripts, enhanced with details such as borders and miniature illustrations used to enhance and enrich the text and the narrative in there. You will have seen examples of these, even if you haven't seen an actual physical manuscript. You may have seen Disney films such as Snow White, Cinderella, Sword in the Stone, especially in Sleeping Beauty. Concept artist Evan Earl, who was one of the key visual minds for Sleeping Beauty. If you have a quick Google of his name, you will see those very sharp, angular, colourful forms that make Sleeping Beauty known for what it is. He was very much inspired by Très Riches de Jean, Duc de Berry. This is a book of prayers created between 1412 and 1416. I'll be showing you pictures of this book now. You can see the rich details, the rich imagery that accompanied this book of prayers to help illustrate and enhance these tales. In the 1400s, a Chinese technique came into Europe, and this slowed this idea of manuscripts down. You have learned a lot about this technique, especially in year 8 and our first half of year 9. What technique was this? So in the 1400s, Chinese woodblock printing came into Europe and started to become more recognised and used. 100 years later, this technique was used to successfully integrate illustrations with text. At the start, it was difficult to get a balance, to get an understanding. However, a really acclaimed example of this integration was Nuremberg Chronicle, which was created with over 100 printers and 24 presses, and features 2,000 woodblock prints, and this is one of the most well-known examples of integrated words and images to create a full story, and this is the start of what we now know and understand to be modern book illustration. So this brings us on to the activity I want us to do today. I want you to look in your house and find a book with an illustrator in it. This might come easy to some. I know it came really easy to myself because I love my visual books. This might be more difficult for others. Have a hunt. Children's books are very good to find visual illustrators in. Why do you think this might be? Have a think. Why would children's books have more illustrations in it than maybe more adult books? I'm going to leave that open for you to think about. So personally, when I looked through my own collection, I was quite torn between J.K. Rowling's Beedle of the Bard and my favourite books, A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh. Both have beautiful illustrations. J.K. Rowling's Beedle of the Bard features her own illustrations as well, and then I'll go into Winnie the Pooh in a second, because I did not choose J.K. Rowling's Beedle of the Bard because my very beautiful collection edition of that is at home in Ireland, which has all these beautiful illustrations in it. That one doesn't have as many. So what I did was I went for my favourite silly old bear, Winnie the Pooh. And actually this birthday, which I celebrated in this beautiful quarantine we've all found ourselves in, my brother got me this gorgeous edition of Winnie the Pooh with the illustrations by E.H. Shepard. And I knew I wanted to go into these because look at those. So, and I'm just going to open this to maybe This is a collection which has all of these original illustrations which accompanied A.A. Milne's text. So that was my narrative illustrator that I chose. Find one in your house, pick a narrative illustrator, and just do a very brief page exploring this illustrator. I don't need too much detail, I don't need too much depth, it's just about you looking around in your house and finding examples of this work. So all I've done is some watercolour studies of E.H. Shepard's work taken from the book and a quick discussion of him as a narrative illustrator. His watercolour images, so there I'm getting some technical vocab in there, watercolour, visualise the evocative adventures within the 100 Acre Woods. And that's all I've written. I only expect that much writing. It's not a lot of writing. Most important thing I want you to focus on is looking at the visual style and how the visual style translates into a visual narrative. How does his use of watercolour communicate the story? Watercolour is soft, it's warm, it's inviting, and it's very appealing to children. It's in that soft kind of sense. So, activity.